So we've gone through just the general settings for this particular policy. I want to move on to credentials at this point. And so I've got Windows credentials. The system that I'm looking at targeting isn't a Windows system, so I'm going to leave all of these blank. But I could actually set up things like SMB passwords if I wanted to be able to check remote registry settings, for example, or look at files that were available on file shares. So in this case, I'm not actually going to do that. Although, actually, I do have some SMB file shares. So I'm actually going to set some Windows credentials here, and we can see whether it turns up anything just as a result of doing that. Now I've got SSH settings, which is going to allow me to provide a username and a password so that we can actually log into the device. Now, you may wonder why I would want to provide that. Well, the reason for that is because if I provide a username, then I can actually do some investigation of the local system. In this case, I do actually happen to know a login here. In some cases, many cases, you may be doing some sort of black box testing where you don't have a username and password, and you would actually have to go digging for that. In this case, I do happen to have a login on the device, and so I want to provide some credentials for that so that it can log in, and we'll do some local checks in addition to the network checks that we would otherwise be doing. So I'm not going to do anything with Kerberos because I'm not doing any Kerberos or anything like Active Directory, which uses Kerberos. So I'm going to leave those alone. And I've got some clear text protocol settings here. So if I had Telnet running, for example, or RShell or RExec or the R protocols, I could specify a username. Actually, I do have a Telnet server running that I had installed for some testing purposes, but I've already got an SSH login on this particular device, so I'm going to leave those alone. Now, we're going to take a look at the plugins, and it's going to load up all of the plugins. You can see that all of the different sections here are enabled, and these are grouped into categories. So we've got a number of different categories here. And I'm going to scroll back up to the top. You can see backdoors. We've got 88 plugins. CGI abuses. We've got 2,514, and so on. So there are a number of different plugins that are in different categories. At the moment, I've actually got everything turned on. I could go and pick and choose and mix and match, but Nessus will do a pretty good job of running the plugins that are needed based on what's been found. Now we can go over to the Preferences tab over here, and we can load up a number of different preference types. So you can see we've got various things around port scanners and patch management and SMB scope, and we can do SNMP settings. So I'm actually going to do some SNMP settings here. I'm going to leave the community name alone, and the UDP port is okay. So I'm going to leave all of those alone. So I'm actually going to hold off on doing the web application settings for the next video. We'll look into the web application settings that Nessus is capable of doing when they run web application tests.